The Department of Homeland Security, the military, and the intelligence community tell NBC News the U.S. government is gearing up for an unprecedented effort to protect the country on Election Day. According to multiple intelligence sources, U.S. officials are deeply concerned about and preparing for some sort of cyber chaos next week. Current and former officials say an attack on critical infrastructure, including the U.S. power grid, is one of 3 worst-case concerns. One highly placed intelligence source told NBC News, "Your vote is safe, you just might not have any lights." Also on the worry list, a large-scale denial of service. In other words, part of the internet goes down. Or a cyber attack to disable communications and transportation in swing states.
And with the nation so divided, some experts are concerned about a worst-case scenario, violent protests in the streets come election night and beyond. And as we wait for the final votes to be counted, how is the nation preparing for that possibility? New tonight, a look at training being done here in Arizona for federal response units. What role will Arizona's National Guard play? That's still unclear. ABC 15's Nicole Grigg is in Phoenix tonight explaining how our governor plays a key role in this decision for our part of the country.
Experts tell me they think the National Guard has likely already been training for civil unrest come the election night, but details are limited. From our state leaders, as our governor would be the one to deploy them. New video showing Arizona National Guard members training as a rapid response team. This would be the team to be sent if there's civil unrest election night. National Guard members from 2 states are on standby, Arizona for the West and Alabama for the East. 2 Republican governors.
Certainly, I would be the last to say there may not be some kind of politics involved. But the pragmatic truth is, with both the Arizona and the Alabama units, you have immediate access to air.
We asked the governor's office if anyone could speak with us on camera about the role, but we're not given the opportunity. So ABC 15 talking with ASU professor Braden Allenby. He teaches about national security, the military, and emerging technologies. He says if units are deployed, they will be military police units.
And that's important because military police, unlike, say, infantry units, are trained to deal with policing situations. So they're trained to be able to go in to a civilian environment and help impose order through policing, not through military means.
We asked Professor Allenby if he thinks we would see military uniforms at polling locations election day or only if violence erupts.
I would suspect that they probably are not committed to either one. I think that we would probably only see the deployment if there were problems with violence.
News Force cameras also capturing more businesses boarding up ahead of Election Day.
And we've also learned the National Guard is preparing to deploy in several states ahead of Tuesday as concern over possible civil unrest intensifies. News 4's Kim St. Ange live tonight on Wash Ave.
Right now, I'm outside Bella's Frozen Yogurt. This is one of several businesses on Washington Avenue alone that was damaged during unrest in June. And now many of these small businesses, like this frozen yogurt business, are having to make this tough decision whether or not to board up before Tuesday.
Michael's in Brentwood is one of many businesses choosing to board up ahead of Tuesday's election. Clarkson Eye Care also joining the growing list. A company that boards up buildings told News 4 on Wednesday it had 3,500 sheets of plywood to put up at St. Louis businesses by Sunday. Now, that number has already increased to over 4,000.
I think they just want to be prepared just in case, something does happen with the protesting and all that too.
It's a tough decision businesses are facing after many were left with shattered doors and windows during months of unrest this summer and one particularly violent night downtown in June.
Well, it's a very tough decision because if you board up your business and then people come to try to patronize your business, them seeing the board may say they're closed. So that turns off a lot of your revenue.
Cortez Burnett owns King's Turkey Shack in North St. Louis. The restaurant just had its grand opening Wednesday.
We're not planning to board up. I mean, I'm not nervous at all. I basically, trust God.
Burnett originally planned to open in May, but decided to hold off after protesters damaged other businesses in the plaza. And now there's the question of, will they hit that area again?
I hope it don't happen because we don't have the finances to just rebuild like that. We're not a big corporation.
I'm sure a lot of small businesses are feeling that exact same way tonight. I did reach out to both Governor Parson and Governor Pritzker's office, wanting to know if there were any plans in place to deploy the National Guard like we are hearing is happening in some other states. At this hour, I am still waiting to hear back. I did hear back, though, from the Missouri State Highway Patrol, which tells me it is working very closely with St. Louis City and St. Louis County and will have plans in place should there be any civil unrest on Tuesday.
Unforgettable images of 2020, right? I want to show you. Here it is, Sunday night, 10 o'clock, and there are crews busy up and down the sidewalks here on Rodeo Drive, all around Beverly Hills. They are covering up windows with wood. This crew here, you can see, has a pile of wood ready to go up on these windows. And then over here, I want to show you, this is interesting. They've actually erected a metal kind of barrier in front of the glass windows of this store. They're also putting up an anti-graffiti film, all of this in anxious anticipation of the potential for civil unrest following the election. And it's not just happening here. This is happening all over LA and all over the country. This year, Election Day preps mean boarding up and bracing should the results or lack of results in the presidential race lead to protests or unrest. It's yet another 2020 gut punch, leaving voters along Rodeo Drive tonight stunned.
I've seen them doing this since earlier in the day, and I just seen everyone boarding up now. I'm like, wow.
I'm grateful to be in the United States of America and horrified that we have to go through this, and I'm shocked. God willing, it's all protective and it won't be necessary.
Businesses in Long Beach are doing the same, protecting what they can, having learned and lost during the summer's widespread protests over police violence that had the masses in the streets and in some cases led to looting. The Insurance Information Institute says businesses nationwide have faced upwards of $900 million in insured losses this year from vandalism during protests. Along the beautiful Santa Monica coast, preparing for what might be an ugly election reaction. Reinforcements going up on restaurants, apartment buildings, and shops. Locals aren't surprised by the extreme measures, sensing the country is on edge.
I think the stores are wise to board up. I think there is going to be trouble during the election.
We're ready to declare at least one winner already this election season. Contractors like this crew. 25 guys have been working 15-hour shifts for days, building barriers to hold back those who might be dissatisfied and destructive.
We're getting calls through the night, and sometimes we got to turn down jobs and refer them to different companies because obviously we can't handle it.
Now here in Beverly Hills, the Election Day plan goes way beyond just boarding up. The SWAT team from Santa Paula is here for backup, and we've seen them several times driving up and down Rodeo Drive already. And already you can see lots of private security teams in position on many, many corners here in the downtown business district of Beverly.
After a summer of mass demonstrations, the NYPD preparing for possible protests related to next week's election. As we welcome you back here at 5:30, I'm Maurice Dubois.
And I'm Natalie Duddridge in for Christine Johnson. The NYPD put the finishing touches today on a plan to protect residents and businesses as the city prepares for possible election unrest.
And the plan includes specific advice for Midtown shops and restaurants. CBS 2 political reporter Marcia Kramer has the story.
There's a security guard positioned at the door of the Nike store on Fifth Avenue, and other stores along the city's posh Fifth Avenue shopping corridor are also hiring private security or off-duty cops. This as the city girds for the possibility of protests and demonstrations in and around Election Day. They're hoping to avoid a repeat of the violence and looting that occurred during the anti-police protests several months ago. But on the advice of the NYPD, most but not all of the Fifth Avenue merchants are not boarding up their windows. Although some stores in Soho, hard hit last time, are taking no chances. The Fifth Avenue merchants say they're following sensible advice from the cops.
Keep your lights on in the store. Do not have merchandise out in your store. Make sure that your garbage is put put out as late as possible.
Trash cans along the Fifth Avenue corridor will also be removed so they can't be used as projectiles. But the Fifth Avenue Association's Jerome Barth says merchants don't expect the kind of attacks that stunned the city in late May and early June.
The NYPD is much more prepared this time around. People know what to expect.
Police Commissioner Dermot Shea says that the NYPD did make some requests for Midtown restaurants to remove outdoor furniture, clear the sidewalks.
The reason for that was because it's impeding pedestrian traffic. If we expect large protests, it's impeding the right actually of protesters to protest too, and it's forcing people into the streets.
The mayor says violence won't be tolerated.
We're going to be prepared for a lot of protests, prolonged protests, potentially different protest groups confronting each other. But if anything turns violent, we're going to move to stop that immediately.
The NYPD has its eye on a number of protests that have been planned starting Monday.
An election in the middle of a pandemic with a president who's been claiming for months the only way he can lose is if the vote is rigged.
Fraud. That's what they want. Fraud.
These are unusual circumstances, prompting law enforcement officials across the country to prepare for potential Election Day unrest. Democratic officials say they had to cancel campaign events in Texas on Friday after multiple vehicles flying Trump flags allegedly tried to force a Biden-Harris bus off a highway. The alleged incident, an example of how partisan divides are escalating in the final days before the election. One Donald Trump has warned will be fraudulent.
In Philadelphia, which is notorious for what goes on, we want to have poll watchers.
Trump has called for an army of his supporters to keep an eye on the polls, raising fears in competitive battlegrounds like Pennsylvania around the security of the vote and of voters.
We live in a time where people are radicalized to violence, not only to the actually committing acts of violence, but move from a relatively normal state of mind to a radicalized ideology very quickly.
The state is one of at least 5 that are at risk for militia-style activities around Tuesday's elections. But prosecutors say they won't tolerate any voter intimidation.
I got a jail cell and I got criminal charges.
The International Crisis Group, which monitors conflicts and war zones in developing nations, now turning its attention to the U.S. for the first time. A recent report warns political polarization, the rise of armed groups, and the higher than usual chances of a contested outcome are all risk factors. Then there's the Trump factor.
And probably most importantly, we saw a President Trump, who seemed with his words to be courting conflict often rather than trying to calm tensions in the United States. And he's most importantly suggested that he may not be willing to leave office peacefully.
Philadelphia has recently found itself at the center of the president's efforts to sow doubt about the election.
A lot of bad things happen there with the counting of the votes.
But officials there are already keeping watch.
We run an election task force to protect the vote. And of the 24 complaints we've gotten so far on our hotline, none have been serious. But we understand what's in the air, and we are going to be vigilant on Election Day.
In Washington, D.C. this weekend, businesses are once again boarding up following a summer of protests as they prepare for the possibility of post-election conflict or even violence in the streets.
Our political specialist, Sean Boyd, broke the news last night that the big protests are planned, and the city is activating its emergency operations center. Tori Mason downtown tonight. Tori, businesses have already been through so much during the pandemic and that violence over the summer.
Absolutely. And Jim, Denver's public safety director, says there haven't been any credible threats to the city, at least regarding Election Day. But there are signs people are on edge. And after this summer of protests turned violent, a lot of businesses are preparing for the worst. This apartment complex here in downtown Denver, they sent their residents a note explaining that the building would be boarded up out of an abundance of caution. Now others are wondering if they should do the same thing.
The city of Denver will activate its Emergency Operations Center, a first for an election day. But the planning isn't new.
We have always prepared for every election.
Public Safety Director Murphy Robinson tells CBS 4 political specialist Sean Boyd his office is tracking protest groups. Right now, he knows of 2 that are planned.
We don't have any plausible threats that we're really concerned about.
Denver police told CBS 4 they've been in contact with a few businesses to discuss security ahead of the election. Some aren't taking any chances.
Some of the neighbors are talking about, not necessarily maybe boarding up, but using, putting styrofoam board over the windows.
Others are boarding up as the ballots roll in. Cook hopes they won't be needed.
We'll probably add a security guard, but we're really hoping that everybody doesn't protest violently.
Now, just a couple of minutes ago, the owner of Rita's Law across the street from this apartment complex came up to us and told us that she will not be boarding up her business because she feels that it might incite violence and says that we're all in this together. She was actually joking about when she saw this building this morning, saying that she was wondering if they were preparing for a tsunami or something. But Robinson says he wants people to know that the city will be safe regardless of the results on Election Day. And when it comes to precautionary measures, DPD says business owners should do an evaluation of their property to decide what's best.
There's a run on guns in Michigan. And many are first-time buyers. They're at gun school and on the shooting ranges because of fears of unrest.
Normally, I would have about 100 guns in this cabinet. They've both sold twice.
Some believe the bigger, the better. Others want guns they can hide in their handbags.
I think it could go pretty much through anything, through anybody.
It's almost like a deterrent more than anything else. My goal is to never, ever have to use it.
Dropping all signature on the back.
They've been dropping off early votes amidst a legal battle about allowing guns at the Election Day polls.
My concern is for our seniors who are going to come out to vote on the 3rd and have to worry about seeing a bunch of people outside with guns.
Get out and vote! And this in a swing state where the FBI discovered a plot to kidnap the governor over her lockdown measures and where multiple militia are active.
These militiamen, they're radicals, you know. They consider them domestic terrorists and they should be jailed.
One former CIA officer is warning America's focus on ISIS needs to switch to its homegrown terror.
It's the difference between whether our democracy will survive as it was built. I think the soul of the country is quite literally on the ballot.
And there are multiple armed groups, like the Boogaloo Boys, who insist they're not supremacists, but fighting government tyranny. We watch them preparing, they said, for civil war. Several Boogaloos have been accused of plotting violent attacks, but these men insist they're patriots defending freedoms.
We only meet violence with violence, and that's only to bring the situation to a neutral setting.
Would you be prepared to kill someone in the name of liberty, though?
I'll kill someone in the defense of the innocent.
The rise of groups just like this one are what many believe are part of the problem in America. And the challenges they pose will be around long after the polls close.
I don't think the Prime Minister knows how we'll get out of it. We called for a short lockdown across the school half term. We thought we could do a short, sharp lockdown then. The government's own scientists back in September urged Boris Johnson to go for a short lockdown. And we all said, if you don't do something quickly now, we'll be faced with a longer, deeper, more disastrous lockdown later. And that's where we are now. We're on the eve of a longer lockdown with restrictions deeper than what we had proposed weeks ago. So we're paying the price for Boris Johnson's dither and delay. And we don't even know how long it's going to last, because Michael Gove yesterday toured the studios and was asked whether it could go beyond the beginning of December, and he said yes.
How can you be arguing with us when you're out here with these people? You're a hypocrite! You're a hypocrite! You are a hypocrite! Oh, am I pathetic? Answer my question. Why are you out here with these people? Take off your mask, guys. Why are you outside here? How do you know? How do you know they don't have the virus? Fuck off. You are a hypocrite!
This is dangerous, people. Very dangerous. We need to wake up now. Take off your mask, mate. Come on. Ask the people. Think of the children. Think of the future.
Singing, we are the 99%. We are the 90. Together we are mighty. Emotional, so the words can either come out today. Over the most beautiful planet. We think that the most. Everyone is standing up.
आप लोग आए हैं कभी ना साथियों को बधाई